Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Gopi Jana Bala Gopi Jana Bala Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Hari Bol. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagno Brahmanahutam Brahmayavatina Gantavyam Brahmakarma Samadhina Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagno Brahmanahutam Brahmayavatina Gantavyam Brahmakarma Samadhina. I'll just go right to the translation. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Actually, this comes before that long series of descriptions of different jhatis. Forgive me, I mentioned after. It comes just before that. It comes after another kind of transcendental knowledge describing the intricacies of karma. It's difficult to understand. What is karma, what is vikarma, what is akarma? And then it goes on to a series of 5 verses that describe the mentality and the activities, the lifestyle of someone who is transcendental. And then it gets to this verse, describing the benefit that if one is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, then he's sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities. Full contribution doesn't mean you have to give at least $5,000. That's a full contribution. Otherwise, like you have patron member, this member, that member, isn't it? But it means that whatever I have, then I'm giving it to Krishna. So like we have this, I don't know, somehow they gave me this stick to play with about 1.5 years ago. And inside it, they have different rods, and it's like the mind, body, and words. And touch the floor like that. We're supposed to be surrendering our mind, body, and words at the lotus feet of Krishna in devotional service. So if we actually can do that, then that's a full contribution. And that, it doesn't mean you have to take sannyasa, but that's the criterion. The Prabhupada writes some very deep philosophy. How activities in Krishna consciousness can lead one ultimately to the spiritual goal is described here. There are various activities in Krishna consciousness, and all of them will be described in the following verses. Of course, Prabhupada is saying these are activities in Krishna consciousness. So he cuts to the chase, as we say. These different types of yajnas, they're Vedic activities. You might argue and say they're not necessarily performed in full Krishna consciousness, but that's the ultimate purpose of it. The yoga ladder over here. There are various activities, okay, but for the present, just the principle of Krishna consciousness is described. A conditioned soul entangled in material contamination is sure to act in the material atmosphere, and yet he has to get out of such an environment. The process by which the conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness. For example, a patient who is suffering from a disorder of the bowels due to overindulgence in milk products is cured by another milk product, namely curds. The materially absorbed conditioned soul can be cured by Krishna consciousness as set forth here in the Gita. This process is generally known as yajna, or activities, sacrifices, simply meant for the satisfaction of Vishnu, or Krishna. The more the activities of the material world are performed in Krishna consciousness, or for Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. Samadhina. There it is, by complete absorption. That's the gloss. In other words, that's the word for word of samadhina, which is the last Sanskrit term in this shloka, this verse. The word Brahman means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual, and the rays of his transcendental body are called Brahma Jyotir, his spiritual effulgence. Everything that exists is situated in that Brahma Jyotir, but when the Jyotir is covered by illusion, Maya, or sense gratification, it is called material. This material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness, whereas the veil or the curtain of Maya can be removed by Krishna consciousness. Thus, the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor, and the result are all combined together, Brahman, or the absolute truth. The absolute truth covered by Maya is called matter. Matter, dovetailed for the cause of the absolute, regains its spiritual quality. Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman, or the Supreme. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi, or trance. It's the same here, samadhina, by complete absorption. There's another word, avesha, the same idea. Anything done in such transcendental consciousness is called yajna, or sacrifice for the absolute. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer or leader of the performance, and the result or ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the absolute, the Supreme Brahman. That is the method of Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. have too much time to expound on this, but we had two lists towards the end of the purport. And one was the consumption, the consuming agent, who was Vishnu or Krishna, the performer, and then we had another list at the end. And everything becomes one, or at least becomes unified in Brahman. So apparently Srila Prabhupada is doing two things in the sense that he's, as he usually does, cut to the chase. He's translating Brahman in Krishna consciousness. And academics may criticize this and say, no, how can he do that? But actually one of my answers to that challenge is that when we go to the end, the last verse of various chapters in Bhagavad Gita that seem to be talking about different things, and Krishna consciousness is sometimes more implicit than explicit, but then when you get to the last verse, there's no doubt about it that this is where Krishna was going with it. It's not a question of, oh, this is Bhakti-vedanta Swami interpretation. No, this is where Krishna is going. That's why it's Bhagavad Gita as it is. Like, for instance, chapter 6, we hear all about the Ashtanga yoga system. And goes into quite a lot of detail about that. And then it gradually shows the higher rungs of the yoga ladder in that context. And within the Ashtanga yoga, that means the eightfold yoga system. And the last echelon is called Samadhi. And we also have that in this verse. So it seems, well, that chapter is about Ashtanga yoga. Why is Prabhupada always, saying it's about Krishna? But then what is, there is, explicit reference also within some of those verses. But then at the end, Yoginam api sarvesham adaitir gatinantaratmana shadavan vachate yoma samya yukta tamomataha. If I may, on a personal note, just to share something very personal with you. Right upstairs, probably in August of 1975, right upstairs, and I was moved in the temple, that was the first verse of Bhagavad Gita that I ever memorized. It took me about 3 hours to get that Madgati Nantaratmana. That killed me. I said, I don't know how anyone could memorize verses. But as they say, drops of water wear away the stone. You keep going. And shlokas are actually transcendental fun. And I strongly recommend, as you build up a little momentum, it becomes like a Jagannath. Jai Jagannath. And you can't stop. It just becomes so, how should we say, progressive. It becomes so progressive. Then if you kind of ease off, then you have anxiety because you feel it's falling away from you. But you have this impetus to just keep going. It may seem passionate and cumulative, and in my case it probably is. But it's also a very wholesome activity. It's certainly a nice way of controlling the mind. So, in other words, the verse before the last verse in the 6th chapter was saying that the yogi is better than the tapasvi, the ascetic. He's better than the jnani, or the mental speculator. He's better than the karmi, obviously. Therefore, tasma yogi bhava Arjuna. In all circumstances, Arjuna, be a yogi. Be a yogi. Now, if the chapter end there, then we might have doubts. How does this exactly become Krishna consciousness? This is nice. In many other temples, you get a closed curtain or a little tiny picture. Here we don't have so much pangs of separation. In one sense, I wish I did have strong pangs of separation. Okay, so in the 6th chapter, we do have that last verse. And of all yogis, first of all, be a yogi, but what kind of yogi? And Krishna explicitly says that the ones whose mind is absorbed in me, he's completely engaged in my service. He's most intimately united with me in yoga. And that's the very meaning of yoga, to link with the Supreme. And he is the highest of all. And you can go into the various chapters, and you look at the last verse of chapter 7, last verse of chapter 8, and you always find a similar thing, that Krishna's coming, it's like a home run. He's going around and coming back to the home base, which is surrender, and become Krishna conscious. Now, if I would have had the time, I was warning you about the philosophical indulgence, I should put it like that, philosophical exploration, I said, that's inherent in this verse, is that we hear about two, and there's one book that came out a number of years ago called Our Original Position, and it was a defense of the idea that we did fall from the spiritual world. We won't get into that though. But the thing is, it's in that book, an interesting point was made that spirit and matter are the two fundamental ontological categories of the Vedic scriptures. What that means in more everyday language. In other words, these are irreducible metaphysical categories. You can't, they're very fundamental. They're like the bottom line. It's like there's one energy is spiritual and one energy is material. And we do follow, not that we follow, but of course the Vedic scriptures greatly antedate René Descartes. It was only about 400 years ago. With a dualism, this idea of dualism. In terms of matter, we are dualists. We have to go beyond duality, but philosophically, we're dualists. We recognize that there's spirit and matter. But there's a third thing that we recognize, which is Krishna. In other words, the controller of both. That's real knowledge. So, this verse is interesting because we're celebrating Ratha Yatra and Snana Yatra of Lord Jagannath. So Lord Jagannath, he's sometimes called Daru Krishna. It's very sweet. Ki Jai. Oh, amen. Okay, now it's my turn. It's like the amateur hour.
Oh my God.
He's good. Does he do that every Sunday? No. For those that don't like philosophy, they paid him to do this. Sabotage. All right, sir, please, we'll be done very soon, and then you can continue your ecstatic singing, which is very sweet, actually, and we do appreciate it. We would like an encore, but a little later. Okay. So, this is like the big question, and this was a big question. It's not like Krishna consciousness is not like a vacuum. It's not like Western philosophy is a vacuum. In other words, philosophy is philosophy. It's not, it's not like there's limitations to Western philosophy, but it doesn't mean that there's no philosophical content. And Krishna consciousness doesn't mean that it sometimes doesn't connect with the best of Western philosophy. For instance, Prabhupada said that Socrates was a great jnani. He knew he wasn't his body. He must have been Brahman realized, because he was completely indifferent to even drinking the hemlock and getting executed like that. So the question comes up, and after Descartes, and it comes up, even in Bhagavad Gita it comes up, and it's a little mysterious. How do these two fundamentally disconnected, irreducible, I'll say again, ontological categories of existence, matter and spirit. How do they interact? It's like you take oil and you take water, they never mix together. So how does that work? So that was a problem for Descartes. And there was a philosopher, Malebranche, and he solved the problem. And there are others. This is called occasionalism, where they just said that, well, actually, we have nothing to do with these bodies. See, we're not the only ones that ever said that. I'm not saying he was vegetarian or bhakta. He was a philosopher. But he got that right. So we give credit where credit is due. In other words, he said, we have nothing to do with these bodies. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
And that's also philosophically consistent with what we're trying to emphasize here, that spirit and matter, they don't merge. We're a combination of spirit and matter, just like you can take oil and water and put it in and mix it around, and whatever's there is a combination of oil and water, but they didn't get homogenized, they didn't mix together. And then verses at the end of chapter 13 of Bhagavad Gita, you could look at that afterwards, you'll see that also gives metaphors or analogies that confirm this point, that it seems like they mix, but they don't really mix. So Malebranche was right, and it was a defense of Cartesian dualism, and also, as Descartes tried to do, was to invoke the how all this relates to God. And God, sometimes we could say false ego is the junction point between spirit and matter, and in a certain way that works, like the interface. But ultimately the real interface, the real connection, is the source of both spirit and matter. So there is actually a connection between spirit and matter. And see if you can keep up with my pace, because I'm obliged to try to be very succinct and compact now. But it's often mixed. And Malebranche had it right. Listen, I want to move my hand. I'm not moving my hand. You know, prakriti, kriyamanani, you know that verse. We're not the doers of activities, are actually being done by the modes of material nature. Now the modes of material nature, of course you have Durga Devi, but you know, they're not, where is the consciousness? That's actually super soul. Or God, Krishna in the heart. The Lord in the heart, super soul. So by super soul, he says, I have desire to move my hand, and okay, I want to move my hand. Just see, am I moving my hand? No, super soul is doing it. Now in the computer age, this becomes more believable, or what's a better word than believable? It becomes more sensible, more reasonable. Before the computer revolution, when computers didn't become so super fast, I mean, let's face it, folks, I mean, it's unbelievable. It's like mystical what's going on. You have clouds now, you have the Google Drive, you have this cloud, that cloud. And, I mean, we just do it, and we just say, well, this is pretty convenient, but it's like amazing speed what's going on. So we could appreciate how if, you know, Mr. Bill Gates or whoever now is the big computer acharyas and gurus are able to manage all this amazing technology and get it to move so fast. But to speak of Yogeshvara, who's the master of mystics, it's not a big deal for him. Each and every one of us, we have this instantaneous, real-time interaction and, how should we say, interactivity with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. While we're here in this, here we go again, virtual reality of the material world. So that's an important hint. So this verse is showing that's another way that although it may seem that spirit and matter have no connection, but when we connect them both with the root of both spirit and matter, then there is no matter. There's only spirit, and that's what's happening here. It's Krishna, over any time. So it happened. I thought spirit and matter are completely separate. Oh, what about Yukta Vairagya? That has a lot to do with this verse. The idea of Yukta Vairagya, that here we have a camera, here we have a microphone, here we have a larynx. That means a voice box and a bone over here. and sometimes known as the Adam's apple. I mean, we have all these material things, and how can it be spiritual? What about food? It's food. Prabhupada said, but it's prashadam. In other words, it's offered, it's regular food. You go to whatever the school used to be, Bradley's Stop and Shop, now it's something else. You remember that? You go to, in 1979 I met the chauffeur of the limousine that Mr. Bradley used to drive around in. And this man was so happy to be driving such a great personality around. Pretty amazing. I guess he was very philanthropic also, Mr. Bradley. But whatever it's called, you go to the store and you get your food. You get, like, you know, like everyone else. I mean, it's food, it's material. It came from the earth, right? But where did the earth come from? In other words, where did everything come from? Everything is actually Brahman. Sarvam kalvidam Brahman. Prabhupada, you can find about 80 different hits in the Veda texts, which is not so many, but enough of this particular Vedic, I think it's Priyatanyaka Upanishad, this Vedic mantra. Everything is Brahman. And Prabhupada once told the BI that actually matter is just spirit in its potential state. In other words, as it's saying here, we're in the spiritual sky right now. We're just in a cloud called, not the computer cloud, we're in a cloud called the Mahatattva. So, you know, you see, even on the cover of the first volume of Canto 1 of Srimad Bhagavatam, you see the whole spiritual sky. Nowadays they have a poster that shows spiritual sky, Maheshtam, material world, and all the details. You can study that poster for hours and hours. We're in the spiritual world. Even if we're in Maya, we're in the spiritual world. Because it's just, we're in a cloud in the spiritual sky. It's called the Paravyoma, so we're in the Mahatattva. So that's the, like, location, you could say, but essentially everything is spirit. For Krishna there's no Maya. So as we advance, we see more of the oneness of things with Krishna. We also recognize the difference as well, but not so much the difference. We're seeing more and more oneness. That's why the most advanced devotee, he sees everything Krishna, 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 everyone's serving Krishna. He doesn't preach. That doesn't mean that when a very advanced devotee, such as Srila Prabhupada, voluntarily subjects himself to the rigors, you might say, of becoming a preacher, where you do have to discriminate and you do have to see, wow, this person is really suffering. I really have to help them. The Uttama Adhikari doesn't see that. He sees everyone is connected with Krishna. He's so Krishna conscious that immediately he doesn't have to figure it out. It just automatically sees how everything is connected with Krishna. Even if for us we have to see, well, it's connected with this, it's connected with this, it's connected with this. And so indirectly, you know, you see a skunk or something that just is ugly or that's got nothing to do with Krishna, or even some bad vibes we get. And so that's not Krishna. But Uttama Adhikari, Krishna, you can see immediately how everything is Krishna. So why preach? The only person he thinks who's not perfectly Krishna conscious is himself. And I can't explain that, but it's there in Shastra. But he comes down to the preaching platform and he discriminates. You know, he sees 4 different categories of different kinds of people and he treats them in different ways. And Prabhupada was so expert in that, how to deal with different types of people, everyone from the hippies like us to, you know, very famous and aristocratic people as well. So there is a connection. The connection is at the root. It's all coming from Krishna. And also, in the introduction for Bhagavad Gita, the material energy is also eternal. Yes. In other words, there is such a thing as a matter. It really exists. Even according to the very rigorous definition of existence given in 2:16 in Bhagavad Gita, that which exists is eternal, never changes. So that's a very strict definition of what it means to exist. So actually, the material world is real in that sense, and if we have to take a quiz and you have to say, is the material world real or unreal? Better check real, because we're obliged in the sense that we're formally connected with the Madhva Sampradaya, and that's one of their positions, is that the material world is real. That's not the only reason we say it's real. It's real, as Prabhupada explains. It's coming from the ultimate reality. How can it be unreal? A mirage is real. There is such a thing as a mirage. Virtual reality is real. There is such a thing as virtual reality. But the contents of the mirage, the phenomenon that we're seeing, is false or unreal. The interactions that we have while we're in Maya, in virtual reality, the material world, if I can put it like that, is all illusory and real. And there are many verses which describe the whole, all the phenomenon, everything we take for granted in the material world as actually unreal, including the very first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's another topic, but it's kind of related. With unreal and unreal is related to this topic of how the two connect. And that's our homework assignment, to write a very abstruse philosophical essay on that. So anyway, I didn't mean to be, I tried to, how should we say, sweeten it up a little bit, with make a few jokes at the beginning there. So it was kind of a mixed bag, and include a little something for everybody. So thank you all so much for your kind attention. But before we jump into the halava, if there is, I just wanted to ask if we have any brief questions. I mean, very brief. Yes, Prabhu.
I'm just caught up right now, and you spoke of feeling the separation from Krishna, because I used to live in this temple for a little while, and when you live in a temple, you know, the temple has everyday things, or routine, if you want to call it, and you get up with the deity, you lay down with the deity, you eat, and everything has a process. But when you live outside the temple, I can't find that same process that I find when I'm living here, so I don't feel as connected as when I was here. Even when I do japa and I'm chanting, and I read, I still don't feel the way I felt when I had the association of the devotees in the temple, being able to sleep here, go down and do service in the kitchen, come up and wake up and do Mangal Arti, and you know, all the different artis during the day. And I was just wondering, is there some kind of suggestion besides just chanting and reading? You know, I
think it has a lot to do
very
with it.
difficult.
So I think the missing element that you seem to be indicating is association. Because you can also, I mean, one thing I can suggest is to just write down a sadhana schedule for regulated activities, and hopefully you'll have some association. But even if you're just by yourself, you just when you wake up in the morning, you look at your schedule, and you can make it similar to that of the temple. That if your work commitment or other commitment doesn't allow you to, then you can still wake up a little earlier and have some hours of sadhana every morning, and that's very important. But again, even if you do that, if you're doing it just by yourself, or maybe just only one other person, it's not as easy or as exciting and enlivening. It's really the more the merrier really holds true in Krishna consciousness. I mean, the Rath Yatras were ecstatic, the weather was great, the way it was managed, everything was very well orchestrated. But the greatest thing was that there was more participants, more devotees came. And probably more members of the general public, but just so many devotees. And we really made a good showing. So we also want to make a good showing every single day. Sansara davan avalida loka dranaya karunya dunadanapam vakasya kalana kunavasya vande guru shri charanaravinda vande guru shri charanaravinda vande guru shri charanaravinda. Wasn't that enlightening? Yeah. more to it. It's more exciting. It's called Sankirtan. We can have our Kirtan, our Bhajan, but Sankirtan. And that's more in the line, that's more of the desire of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We try to expand this. So there are many different strategies. You'll have to consult with others or figure it out on your own with the help of the Lord in the heart and reading Prabhupada's books. But I'm sure there's a solution. Anybody else? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Yes.
So, the dream and the mirage is real, but it's temporary. So,
I meant it a little differently than that. What I meant was that if we go by the rigorous definition of what it means to exist, in other words, for something to be really real, then it can't change, it has to be eternal. Even if it's going to last a billion years, say like this Earth planet, in billions of years, but it's going to end. Even the sun is going to burn itself out in this material world. We don't disagree with the scientists on that. So, where is reality? So the thing is that the analogy of a mirage, I'm saying that it's not that illusion doesn't exist. No, those mirages exist. That peculiar phenomena, that peculiar event where we're sure that there's an oasis and a palm tree and it's right there and we see it and we start crawling towards it. That experience exists. It's like Descartes, I think therefore I am. In other words, even if everything I'm thinking is an illusion, but the fact that I'm experiencing something indicates that I exist. Consciousness is real. The contents of consciousness, and that's another thing, but we're talking about just the fact of experiencing. Whether what I'm experiencing objectively exists or not, that's real. But on the other hand, what's really out there, that's also real. The things in themselves, that's real. It's Krishna's energy. When we more advanced we become, we don't just see phenomenon, the interplay between the senses and the sense objects. We see what's really out there, and we're also more firmly rooted in what's really in here, which is an eternal, existing, living entity. But we're like in Never Never Land. Never will it really be a real phenomenon, and never will it really be a real false ego. So we're in Never Never Land. There's the interplay between one never and the other never. But behind the things in themselves is Krishna's energy, and within the false ego, there's actually real ego. So that was what I meant when I said, same thing with virtual reality. You can say virtual reality, it doesn't exist. Well, it doesn't exist as we think it exists, but it's not like you didn't have 10,000 hours of programming to make it. It's not like Lord Brahma had no work to do when he created the virtual reality of the material world. I mean, that's a suggestion, it's a model of material world. Sadhguru Prabhu wrote a whole book called Maya, The World as Virtual Reality. It starts off with a reference to the Matrix movie. Okay, one last question. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, one last question or comment? No, okay, we are up to time. Thank you all very much, especially our wonderful bhajan singer. Prabhupada ki jai.